Welcome, everybody. My name is Rena Bernards. This workshop is for the purpose of training moderators in the Common Ground workshop, specifically on immigration. And since the Immigration Initiative is calling for in-person workshops because we want to connect to the district, the congressional district that we are all associated with, knowing that many of the immigration policies are made nationally, we are encouraged to do in-person workshops. And just to give you a little introduction to myself, I've been a moderator at Braver Angels since 2017. I created the Common Ground Workshop and I ran the Trustworthy Election Project, which was the model for what we're doing here with the Immigration Initiative. So my co-trainer is John. And John, please introduce yourself and say what your role is with Common Ground.
Yeah, hi. I started volunteering with Rena at the beginning of the pandemic because I couldn't do other things like babysitting my grandchildren. And it's been a great partnership. There's the first thing that they asked me to do was to help, this would have been 2020, take her in-person Common Ground that she had piloted and make it something that would be online and production worthy. So it's been a great collaboration. As I mentioned, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I also have moderated quite a few of these along with all the other workshops, and I'm involved in a number of the national teams.
Okay, so as we proceed, as I describe the in-person, there will be moments where John will describe what's different if you're doing an online workshop. So just to get started, the purpose of the Common Ground Workshop is to take a single issue about which Reds and Blues disagree, bring together at most 8 on each side, and have them find out where the agreement is. So the beginning of the Common Ground Workshop is similar to the Red Blue Workshop, where we do get to know each other. We have some dyads, different questions, but similar, fishbowl, etc. And then something very different happens. And we have a process for getting people towards common ground, which I think you'll find interesting. One of the things about the Common Ground Workshop is that every participant gets a unanimous, any points of agreement that we come out with are unanimous. Every participant who is in the workshop gets a veto vote. And this is one of the unique ways that we're able to create safety to have a discussion about a difficult issue. Another feature of the Common Ground Workshop is that sometimes it's nonpartisan. So for example, the very first one was about abortion and it was pro-choice and pro-life. However, the Common Ground Workshop on immigration, this project is going to be red-blue because we felt that that was the most efficient way to divide people who have a different ideological perspective on the issue of immigration. When you do this workshop, you will receive a folder, a Google resource folder that will provide you with a moderator training guide and the slide deck. The slide deck and the moderator training go together, and you'll have lots of other resources in there, such as other training tapes and timelines, for the workshop. And so we really encourage you to look at all that when you receive it. Another thing to consider is that the Common Ground Workshop on immigration, there's a set pre-read that every workshop will be using. Unlike sometimes when you've done a workshop, let's say you're doing it on homelessness, you create your own pre-read. That's not true for this campaign. We use the pre-read that the leadership team of the campaign has approved. And with that, I'm going to just say that the workshop is 5 hours. And the reason that the in-person workshop is 5 hours There are two reasons. One, some of the exercises are different. So we do a major fishbowl, the way you're used to experiencing it with the Red Blue workshop. In the Common Ground workshop, we have smaller groups that basically answer the same question, but everybody doesn't get to hear from everybody. So there's some time constraints that have changed the exercises. We don't want people to sit in the Common Ground workshop on Zoom for more than 3.5 hours. We feel like that's about a limit before people start not engaging well with their body-brain connection. So the other reason that the Common Ground workshop is 5 hours in person is because there's lots of slack time to change rooms. When people come back to the room, they check their email, they may go to the bathroom. So we have lots of slack time. In addition, we serve lunch, and that is a way to socialize. It's what we all miss by not being in person. Time to talk to moderators can go to somebody and say, wow, I saw that you seemed like you were having some concerns at our last session. What were they? That's the kind of thing that you could do in person, which is really exciting as a moderator. So John, is there something else you want to say here at this point?
Well, just to emphasize that with the online workshop, which is what I'll give you a couple of highlights of, given that it's only 3.5 hours, and that's long for a Zoom workshop, but that's all the time we have, and moderators need to respect that restriction. That's hard. There's a lot of work in keeping to those timelines that you'll see slide by slide. And the other thing is we find it best to limit each side for online to 6 people. For in-person, like with Red Blue, you can have 8 reds, 8 blues, maximum. Better to keep it at 6 and 6 because that's just going to make things more manageable in terms of time.
And I will say that 6 and 6 is a new innovation. John and I are constantly getting feedback and shifting things. Every month there's a new release. So if you have feedback on the Common Ground workshop, please give it to us and we will consider it. And that was one thing that came out of a recent suggestion and we kind of liked it. So we're going with the 6 as the limit. When you do an in-person workshop, there are some choices to make. And some of it depends on your venue. But you have a choice of using the slides as you would in a Zoom. The slide deck's right there. You could project it onto a screen. You probably have to bring your own computer and set it up with the technology of the venue. Or you can be really old-fashioned, and this is how we used to do it in 2017, and use those paper flip charts and markers. You have a choice either way. If you're going to use a paper flip chart and markers, I suggest you have a handout, or we're asking you to have a handout of the slides so participants can follow along, just like we gave you a handout of the slides today. And the other choice that you have to make, and this has to do with whether you are wired for 2 rooms. So the first Trustworthy Election Common Ground workshop we did in a venue that had a screen in one room, and we didn't have it for the next room. The organizer there actually brought in their own flat screen TV so that we could have it wired in both rooms. But that's above and beyond. So if you don't have that capability, you prefer the flip charts. I know David Lapp prefers flip charts, as do some others of you on here. Go for it. So you have both options if you're doing it in person. And now the other choice you have to make is whether to serve lunch. If you serve lunch, we are suggesting a 10 to 3 time frame with a half hour for lunch that's built into the timeline. Or you could do a 1 to 6 tell people it's after lunch, but have a nice half hour for snacks, rest, communicating with each other, and so forth. That would be up to your individual group that's organizing the workshop. All right, we are now going to go to the slide deck.
Here we go.
Okay. When you get, as I said, the slide deck is incorporated into the moderator guide. There's lots of information under each slide. And we really encourage you to really read this first slide very carefully as a moderator. Not just the slide, but the information that's there underneath. There's information throughout. We're just going to show the slide, but every slide has a text underneath that is basically the script of the workshop. And we're encouraging you to really look at that. We also have in the resource folder will be a printout of all of the text that's underneath the slides. Okay, so now we can go to slide 2. Slide 2 is where the workshop starts when your participants arrive or online as they're arriving. For in-person, we find the music to be optional. It may be awkward to have music going while people are coming in. Or it may be nice. It's really up to you whether you want to use this. One of the things that you will have to do as moderator is go in and put in the location and date and time. And there are things like that throughout every slide. Not every slide. Some of the slides have things that you need to manually go in and change to address the immigration workshop. Okay, so let's go on. When everybody's there, you welcome everybody. You give them whatever information they need about logistics, housekeeping, and then you start the workshop. The workshop on immigration will give information on 2 slides about the Citizens Commission on Immigration. And we're doing this, the reason we start with this is to build excitement that you are part of something. When you as a participant, when you come to this workshop, you're part of something bigger than yourself. You're here to join and find common ground, which will inform the report that finally comes out. We're going to ask people to just read, as moderator, to read this slide and to read the next slide to the participants. Okay, and then we go on. In person, you get to introduce the people in the workshop that are the organizer, the staff, the sponsor of the workshop, the venue person, whoever needs to be introduced to be honored for the work they did to put this on. Of course, you won't use this slide if you're in person. If you're doing it online, you might want to do it. People put their pictures and it's kind of cool, but it's optional. Then the moderator, and remember, every workshop has 2 moderators, and we've divided up in the script who does what. You as a team, as a co-moderating team, can switch it up and change it any way you like. Our assumption is that moderator 1 is the lead moderator and they have experience with a Common Ground workshop. So we are asking every workshop that happens that if the lead moderator, moderator 1, have experience with the workshop of the Common Ground. And if they don't, then we're asking them to observe one, or that was probably the best. Observe one before you actually do the workshop.
Hey, Rena.
Yeah.
Interesting question from Nancy Richmond. Do the co-moderators have to be a red-blue team?
No. This is something that was established early on in Braver Angels, that the moderating teams do not have a color. And so you never identify what your color is when you're a moderator. We don't want to put the pressure to have a red-blue moderating team, which is really a lot to put on any workshop. So the moderators can be both reds, both blues, or one of each. Okay. So you read the goals. And since they're sent out ahead of time, really encourage you to not take a lot of time with this. Read the goals, and the next slide is the agenda. Now, they will have received this ahead of time. Don't take a lot of time with this when you're moderating a workshop, but I'm going to take a little bit of time here so you get to understand the full flow of the Common Ground workshop. So it starts with introductions, and that's something that we skipped. There's a lovely experience where everybody in the room gets to introduce themselves. Not observers, by the way. Observers do not introduce themselves, but the participants introduce themselves. The reason observers don't introduce themselves are twofold. One is time, actually 3 reasons. One is time, that really takes up a lot of time. 2, that we're not trying to make sure that's red-blue balance the way we are with participants. So we don't want somebody coming in and being overwhelmed that there are so many reds or so many blues in observers. That is not relevant to the work of the workshop. And the third reason is that we want participants to get an experience of who's in the room with them. Who are their interplayers? Who are they going to be finding common ground with? We don't want them getting distracted by others. In terms of questions, if you have a question, please put it in the chat to John, and he will raise things that others may be concerned about.
Yeah, I have one.
He may answer the question himself.
I have one from Steve Warshaw. And Harry, yeah, just chat me whatever your question is, Harry. From Steve, do participants normally wear identifying name tags?
Yes, participants wear a little tag with a blue dot, red dot, with their name. There are cards in front of their name that are in either red or blue. They alternate around the room. And we are very clear that this is a red-blue workshop, that this is a workshop of reds and blues. So the first exercise is a fishbowl. And so let's say the reds go into the fishbowl first, answer the questions, then the blues do, then we all reconvene and do a debriefing. And the purpose of the fishbowl is to explore our personal connection to the issue. The second exercise is a red-blue dyad. And during the red-blue dyad, we explore our stand on addressing immigration and ask each other some questions of curiosity. Then there's a debriefing. You have experienced red-blue workshops, should be familiar with those structures. At this point with exercise 3, things change a great deal from the way yes.
Before you go there, I mean, they're just giving me some good questions. I want to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
From Chris Corfanta, how many observers are allowed for both online and in person?
Okay, so our principle is never more than the number of participants. So that would be 12 online and 16 in person. And then you may have staff or the organizer, the moderators, that's on top of that.
And then from Harry Heinzelman, this is a fascinating question, given that we're trying to do this very soon here in Atlanta. As part of the introductions, shouldn't we introduce an observer who is a representative coming from a Congress office?
Absolutely, that makes sense to me, that if there
Yeah.
are important dignitaries, you know, the minister of the church that's given us the venue, et cetera, et cetera. Those would be appropriate people to introduce.
And then
Oh,
one
go
last one
ahead.
from Marianne Coulter. Are we allowing people who are either undocumented or on their way to getting citizenship to participate?
Great question, and the answer is yes. Okay, so we go into the two separate rooms, red and blue, and identify, and I'll go over this more in a while, but identify areas of potential agreement. Come back, people have a chance to gray out what doesn't make sense for them personally. Everybody gets a chance to do that. Finally, we put people in an exercise of mixed red and blue teams where they further explore things that got grayed out. If we change it this way, if we add a maybe, if we phrase it differently, if we bring in a different concept, can we get agreement? And we come back, and again, people have an opportunity to veto those. Finally, we have action plans in person. It's in a red blue pair, and online, the whole group comes up with action plans together. We don't have time to put people in pairs. And finally, evaluation, and probably the most important thing that you don't want to miss is the checkout question. What are you taking away with you? And here, you just do participants and staff and dignitaries, for better, for worse. After you present the agenda, we're going to go on to ground rules, and let's go on with that. Let's move on. This is where introductions happen. After the agenda, the goals, and the ground rules, introductions happen. Exercise 1. And here we have the fishbowl. What is at the heart of the issue of addressing immigration for me? Please share a story about one experience or relationship that led you to this. Here's something in the Common Ground workshop that's a little different than Red Blue. We encourage people to tell a story about their own personal connection to the issue. And it's very important, very powerful. Somebody asked about, do we take people who are not documented yet? Absolutely. We want to hear their stories. Do we take people who are really concerned about the impact of immigration on our country, labor market, the schools, whatever it is? Yes, we want to hear those stories. So that's what happens in the fishbowl. John, you want to say a word about how exercise 1 works when you're doing it online?
Yeah, again, just because of time constraints, people, we use the same general format, but we split into 2 different mixed groups. And again, this is all done by the breakout room manager, the magic of Zoom, and ask similar questions. And then when we come out to do the debrief, we, again, just because of time constraints, we make it very clear we just want to hear from 2 people, like one red, one blue. A lot of the difference is because we only have 3.5 hours.
Okay, moving along. After the fishbowl, before their debriefing, there's a 5-minute, actually a 10-minute break, and the song, this is a beautiful song if you've never heard it. It starts at 5 minutes into the break, and so when the song's done is when you reconvene. And I believe yeah, it's the same online. Is that right, John?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. In the debrief, what did you learn about how the other side sees the issue? And did you find any common ground? This is already working towards where do you see some agreement? Exercise 2. This is red blue exercise. Now, a word on what happens to observers. In everything except exercise 2, they are randomly assigned to one group or another. And that's true for online and in person. When it comes to the dyad, we don't want observers peering in on a dyad. So this is where observers get to go into a separate room, either a physical room, if it's in person, or a Zoom room, if it's a breakout room, if it's online, and they get to introduce themselves and say something about what they're observing. And this is moderated. In person, it's moderated by one of the moderators. And online is moderated by one of the participant managers. So the question is, what are a couple of policies or remedies that I support in relationship to the issue of immigration? Each gets to talk about that. And then, what is a question of curiosity I have about my partner's position? And we teach them, just like in red blue, what's the difference between a gotcha question and a question of curiosity? And we encourage them to ask something of each other. Okay? Debrief. So in the debriefing, we're asking something very different. What was your question of curiosity? So I was matched with somebody of my other color. My question of curiosity to them was this. And what did you learn from their response? So please tell us what you heard and what you learned. And in the in-person, there's a chance to hear from a few people about this. Online, just a red and a blue. But this is a real point of learning. People describe what they heard when they asked the question to the other person. Okay, moving on.
Hey, Rena,
Yeah.
a couple questions. Yep. I can clarify this first one from Terry Donahue. The mixed groups for online, no, they're not 3 folks. Because remember, it's 6 and 6. So it's going to be 3 of each. So each of the mixed groups would have 3 reds, 3 blues. The other one would have 3 reds and 3 blues. And that we're going to use that again later. So that when we say mixed groups, it's half for online, half the number of people split between the two. And that's all documented in the instructions. You won't be confused by that. And then one other thing about from Terry, do the people that have been paired up in exercise 2, do they also stay in the same pair in exercise 5?
I prefer people get to talk to more people. So that would be my preference, but we're not sticklers for that.
Yeah, that's the right answer. It really depends on how you all want to run it. Yep.
Right. Okay. Now we're doing the searching for common ground. This is where things get really interesting. This is called exercise 3. We have people start out in 2 separate groups. And the question is, what are values, concerns, and solutions or remedies? We have to update this slide, where our side and the other side can find agreement. So we're using the word remedy instead of solutions. So policies or remedies. What are values, concerns, and policies or remedies where our side and the other side can find agreement? We tell people the difference. So a value, let's say we use the issue of pollution. A value would be clean air and healthy citizens. A concern would be that increased pollution is causing health problems in our community. A policy or remedy would be some kind of forgetting the word, some kind of law that a company would have to follow, that would either be a law that they'd have to follow, or a voluntary prescription that they would encourage companies to follow. So that's the values, concerns, and policies, remedies. That's what they mean. If people ask, what's the difference between a value and a concern? That's how we tell people. Each moderator goes in either a red or a blue room. You decide ahead of time. And participants are given the opportunity to brainstorm values, concerns, and policies in these areas. One important thing that I see I didn't mention is before they go into the room, they have a few minutes to read the pre-read. They have 3 minutes to read the pre-read. Remind themselves, when I read that, I really liked that remedy, and I want to make sure I remember to bring it into my room when I do the brainstorming. Okay, can we move on here?
Yeah, and I'm going to table any more chatting questions because I want to make sure Rena has time for some Q&A at the end. Go ahead, Rena.
Okay. When you come back, each side shares their list. Let's say the Red Star. They share their list. I, as moderator, would ask the Blues, are there any questions or clarifications? Don't start arguing about it, but is there anything that you want to understand better what was meant? The Blues do the same thing. Then we go back to the red list and we say, is there anything, Blues, that you cannot agree with? And every participant speaks for themselves and says, I don't like remedy number 2 that the Reds had suggestion. I can't agree with it because of XYZ. I can briefly state my reasons, and then it gets grayed out. And we do this with both sides. And at the end, the flip chart will look like this. So the red flip chart would look like this. You can see that everything that John's showing, the Blues agreed to, except for some of these policies and remedies down here. They were grayed out. And you want to show a blue one? Same thing. So then we have lunch. A lot of work, a lot of intensity went into that exercise 3. Lunch, come back, and we have moments of personal reflection. You want to show why, John?
I'll just mention that the Google expert, if you're doing electronic flip charts rather than paper flip charts, would have prepared this during that break, namely taken all the work that had been done in exercise 3 on the red side and put it into the left side of exercise 4, and then all the work that had been done by the blue team on the right side of exercise 4. And then this document that you're looking at now is where the points of agreement are going to be finalized, and Rena will tell you how that's going to work. And people, just so you know, when you get this, you'll get samples like what I'm showing you here, just to kind of whet your appetite on what this might want to look like.
Another choice, keep this up just for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Another choice you have as moderator is whether to do the fill-in on yourself or whether to have a scribe volunteer from the community, fill it in either electronically or on the flip charts. I personally like to have a scribe because then I can give my full attention to the group of people I'm working with. I know, John, you like to write it yourself to make sure you're getting it right. Now, when I write with a scribe, I say to the scribe, I'm going to be really bossy here. And I'm going to listen to the participant. You have to put it in exactly the words that I tell you to put in. So you have to have that kind of relationship if you're going to have a scribe.
The real
Okay,
partnership. Yep. Go
real
ahead, Rena.
partnership.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Then we go into exercise 4. We have mixed groups. And you'll have, let's say, if you're doing it in person, 4 reds, 4 blues, go off into 2 different rooms, and they try to wordsmith or introduce new ideas that would make some of those grayed out areas work better. And we encourage these participants to work on the policies and remedies, since that's what's going to most fuel into informing the report in the end. And as you do that, the moderator or the scribe captures whatever agreement was written there on the flip chart. Do we get an example of how that's what
Yeah.
that would look like?
Yeah, so let's take a look here. Let's go down to solutions, policies, or remedies. If you look, and this is a real immigration workshop that we ran back in October. On the blue side here, there had been disagreement on an item, and then they reworked it in this exercise 4, but then it turned out that one person, that's what this asterisk means here, one person, obviously on the red side, could not have full, ownership of that. It wasn't fully unanimous. But look, here's one that was on number 4. It was not all agreed to at the end of exercise 3. The team collaborated, the red-blue team, and hold on, sorry about that. The red-blue team made the changes, and then what you have here in the black on the white background is a fully unanimous exercise 4 agreement. Again, there's so much we could show you here, but in the interest of time, let's give it back to Rena.
Okay. Let's move on. We explained how you go up back again and get the points of agreement, get unanimity, and at that point you have your points of agreement that are going to be used. Each community, and let's move on here to exercise 5. Each community can decide, it was so cool that we made agreement, and I want us to have a meeting with our congressional rep to tell them that we hope that you can do that before the whole commission comes out. It's really up to you. Or let's write a joint op-ed piece in our local paper to show that there are reds and blues who are finding agreement on this issue. This exercise 5 works towards getting to that kind of action step. And we're going to make suggestions, go out as a red-blue team to universities or churches or synagogues or wherever and say, look what we came up with. And this is the time to do that. In person, we do that in pairs. A red-blue pair, you come up, you brainstorm, and online, we don't have time to do that. We just keep the group as a whole to come up with ideas. Okay, let's move on. You're going to end the workshop with reminding people that they're part of this larger team. The Trustworthy Elections campaign came up with 727 points of agreement. Let's see how many points of agreement. We're probably expecting to do more because of we have 2 years. We have more time. We're planning to do more workshops. We're training all of you as moderators, and hopefully you'll be encouraged to put on one of these workshops with your local community. And then finally, You wrap up, you have people do an evaluation, and special thanks to anybody that helped organize it. And finally, what are you taking away from our work today? Everybody gets heard in that exercise. So now we have a chance for questions and answers. And I'm going to start with Mary Ann. Unmute yourself and tell us your question.
Always love the reminder to unmute. One of the things when David came to Chicago, we came up with some issues where there's probably more disagreement between blues and blues and reds and reds. So I'm thinking that the two options might be, do we let them duke it out and you're almost doing like a exercise 4 also within exercise 3, but with a single group, or put those two opposing views both out for exercise 4 to see which ones the red side most agree with.
What was the issue that you were working on that?
Well, the one that we talked about was more existing migrant communities versus undocumented coming in and like use it and asylum seekers and the kind of the battle over city resources.
Okay, so I would suggest,
Yeah.
as I'm hearing it, and I don't know all the details, but I work with people to frame the topic so that there are people on one side and people on the other. Now, that doesn't mean there might not be some disagreement among the blues or among the reds, but really work to, as they say in the debate team, divide the room. Work to frame it in such a way that's divide the room. I don't want to get into more specifics because on the issue of immigration, there are general approaches, not that everybody's going to agree, but that's the work that happens in the red or blue room. They have to come back with unanimity amongst themselves.
Okay, so it's kind of the same old we've used before, and this is my opportunity to say this is my favorite workshop, so thank you so much for inventing it. Like if we can broaden it, so that we can get agreement. So the same tactics I'm thinking will work that we usually do. Like, can we soften the language? Can we broaden it? Okay, thank you. That was really helpful.
Okay, Craig.
Irina, so question, in trying to get several different, values, concerns, or remedies, policy options, there's been a sense, okay, let's try to get 5 each. Now, let's say you're in a situation where there's a lot of conversation. It's hard to get, particularly on the solutions, the 5. Would you prefer the outcome of workshop being, let's say there's, or the group you're in, you get 3, but they're sort of well thought out, high quality versus 5 that have sort of been rushed through, and everyone sort of says, oh, okay, we're out of time, so we'll just go with it, kind of thing.
Well, we're going with a different approach maybe than it had been. We're saying in your individual red-blue meeting, spend 5 minutes on values. I, as moderator, am neutral on whether you come up with 2 or 20. Just 5 minutes on it. Same with concerns and same with remedies, policies, remedies. That is longer. That is a 20-minute time. So 5 on values, 5 on concerns, and 20 minutes on policies and remedies. Again, I, as moderator, am neutral on how many you come up with. If you want to spend all your time working on 3, that's okay. That's okay, because as you said, they may come back more thought through. But it's really up to the group itself. I would find, though, I would say, Craig, I would find that people are so bursting to mention their ideas that usually it gets more than that because people want to get involved.
Yeah, I'm always asking because the workshops I've been in, it's always seemed like it ended up being too general, or not too general, but more general than it could have been if more time was allotted to really duke it out, or not duke it, but talk about, maybe fewer issues.
Okay.
Yeah,
and that's a lens you can bring as moderator if you want.
Thank you.
Okay, Bruce.
My question is that if do you ever run into somebody who comes in and just is not going to agree with the other side? Or do those people just not attend it? And if that's a possibility, how might you handle that?
Okay, great question. Yes, that happens on occasion. We as leadership have spent a lot of time thinking about how to deal with it. What we came up with is that in the last exercise where you're looking for the agreement, if somebody objects, but one person objects, it gets a star next to it. And there, when you type out the points of agreement, we have a template for doing that. When you type that out, you have a place for the starred where only one person disagreed. So that's one way to deal with it, but it will be discouraging if somebody's in that mood, and maybe having pre-selection in terms of conversation about, one of the things we say, are you really willing to work and listen to the other side and work towards agreement? That's something we put out ahead of time as one of the preconditions.
Yeah, we're actually adding that into the Eventbrite. And that's a refinement, like we're always making, that as people are signing up, we're asking them to agree to that. That's exactly right.
Okay, Lee.
What if some fact about how the immigration system works would help clarify the discussion? Like some group presents a remedy that is just completely impractical, given the immigration system.
Okay,
Should
so what we
the
do is
moderator present facts is what I'm.
no, absolutely not. That is not the role of the moderator. And the reason, there are two reasons for that. One is you all are getting trained in a facilitation skills, which is complex and difficult. And I admire all of you for doing this. We cannot expect everybody who's a moderator to be an expert on immigration. What we can do, and this is what we do, is the second reason is you are red or blue, that you're not going to be able to present it objectively, so everybody's going to feel comfortable with how you said that. On the other hand, we have a pre-read that is going to lay out some of that information. And we have the Immigration 101 that moderators can ask participants to watch ahead of time. So, but it's going to be up to the participants themselves to say, hey, that doesn't work well. I can't agree to that. Okay. Isis, how do I spell it? Pronounce your name. Isi.
Thank you. Question in terms of, do you have any guidance for creating diverse groups of participants? And did you have any concerns about the demographic breakdown when you did the trustworthy elections effort? And then kind of related question, if the workshops are ever facilitated in a non-English language?
I love that idea of doing it in a different language. That's wonderful. Wonderful opportunity if you can do that. I don't think we've had that happen yet, but it's a great idea. As far as different demographics, we are encouraging local organizers to reach out to immigrant communities to bring them into the workshops. So that's something we're going to be encouraging. Trustworthy elections, we encourage people to involve minority communities, and we were sometimes more successful than others, but on the whole, probably not as successful as we would have liked to be. Deborah.
Hi, this is a sort of subtle maybe question, but we have the people introduce themselves and ask them why they come. And then we go into also the fishbowl, sort of asking them what's at the heart of the issue for them. And I don't know whether, do you either need to contain people when they say why they came? Because I could see them going into a long thing that might be what's at the heart of the issue for them. And then it's like duplicating. So do you kind of tell people you have 30 seconds to say why you're here? And
Bingo.
Okay.
Bingo. They get 30 seconds. If they can tell a story in 30 seconds, more power to them. But they only have a little bit to say why they came. We don't want to leave it there. That's why we have the fishbowl to go in more depth.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Derek.
Yeah, and this is kind of about the framework overall. I'm wondering, is there any way the timeline of the report might be sped up if it seems it's necessary to be in sync with federal immigration legislation?
Wow, that's a question not for me, but for David Lapp. Um, we're trying to look at long-term solutions. We know that, especially with the new administration coming in, the ground may be shifting. What we may do is have immigration workshops on more specific issues. That's one of the things that we're thinking of. But I doubt that it would be sped up. I don't know. I can't really answer that, but I would say that there's a lot of commitment to keeping to the timeline that we have.
Thanks.
Mark.
Yeah, kind of related to Mary Ann's question, given the nuance, is there going to be any guidance on how to divide the room? And then a separate question, are participants encouraged ahead of time to think about values, concerns, and policies or remedies?
Well, the answer to the second is yes. They are encouraged to think about it ahead of time. There's a participant guide that goes out that will tell people what's there and so forth. As far as how to divide the room, we're dividing the room by red and blue. That's what we decided was the most efficient way to do it. And we thought about other ways and turned it down and just said, look, they're generally in this country two major ways of looking at this. Although there's a lot of nuance and differences within that, but that's how we decided to do it. Terry.
Thank you. So first, thank you for this work. I'm really excited about it because it offers us opportunities to collaborate with 2 or 3 other really active groups in our community that have chosen immigration. And I can see us being able to support them after they do their work. They may want to have participants come together then and find common ground. So thank you. Kind of related to Derek's thing about the report and the timing. And so maybe something that the leadership would consider would be some preliminary revealing of what's coming up. But that leads me to my actual question, which is,
We have 1 minute left, so let's make this quick. Go ahead.
Is there a way to submit? Will we be submitting our consensus driven results from our workshops to?
Absolutely. Every
Okay.
workshop, all the results get documented and becomes data, and it informs the final report. So I want to thank all of you for participating in this, all of you who are listening out there to this recording. Really hope that you end up doing moderating some Common Ground workshops. Please contact me and John if you have any questions. And it was a pleasure working on this with you.